There's a couple of different places we could go from here, Justin. I think one thing that people have been talking about is Ian Jackson. Certainly, he had that really hot streak early on in ACC play. He was putting the ball in the basket really consistently. Why hasn't Ian been able to score the basketball as effectively recently?
This goes back to exactly what I was talking about, even during kind of that hot streak that Ian had. Um, as a freshman in college basketball, uh, especially even with the ACC being weaker, especially in the ACC, going against teams that have scouted you, a good amount. If you really look back on that streak that Ian had, more than likely he was not near the top of the scouting report because of how his minutes were so up and down up until that point. You didn't really know if he was starting, if he was coming off the bench, things like that. Right. So teams start to make adjustments. Right. So okay, North Carolina's having some sort of success when Ian Jackson scores 20 plus points. So what are we going to do? We're going to make it harder and we're going to guard him differently than he already was being guarded. Now, as a freshman in college, you've seen very little adjustments from the college standpoint. And so now all of a sudden you're coming off ball screens and you're coming off dribble handoffs and they're basically doubling you, right? You're coming off some sort of action and the whole entire defense is focused on you as opposed to you kind of being they lose you every once in a while. You get an open look, right? He started to get the same exact treatment that RJ's had all year long. And so going back to what I had said before, if North Carolina expects and is relying on a freshman who once again is uber talented. Ian is one of the best scorers that I've seen with the ball in his hands in a long time, especially as a freshman. But if you expect and you think that reality is that he'll be able to score 20 points a night and carry this offense at times, it's just not realistic, right? And so I think that's kind of what you've seen. It's not, I wouldn't say it's that Ian has checked out. I wouldn't say that, it's anything other than he's being guarded differently. He's being guarded way more with way more attention than he had. Um, and so it was made harder. And so as a freshman, it's hard to adjust to that. Um, and so I think that kind of goes, and I think that's to one of the things that I think with Ian is when you look at um, what he does on the floor, right? He scores, if he scores 25, he's an unbelievable player, right? And I think one thing for him to work on, whether it's him going to the league, I hope he goes to the league first round and, does amazing, or he comes back to school, is affecting the game in other ways than just scoring, right? Like tonight, he was what was his
Ian Jackson was 0 of 8 from the field, 0 for 3 from the 3-point line, and 3 of 4 from the foul line.
right? So, and I think those three free throws, I think they came like towards the end. It was like the last 5 minutes of the game or 10 minutes of the game. And so there for a second, you kind of forget that Ian's on the floor, right? And I've been through, I mean, a ton of basketball players have been through this, but it's how can you affect the game when you're not scoring, right? Or if you are a passer like Elliott, how are you affecting the game if you're not able to get 10, 12 assists, right? And I think for Ian, that's something that I would love to see him, expand as as the season finishes and then as whatever his future looks like, just so that there's never a time. I once had somebody tell me when I was younger, but when I was playing, they said, Justin, you can't ever allow people to forget that you're on the floor, right? So if you're not scoring, there's got to be other ways to, whether that's defensively, whether that's getting to the glass, whether that's making plays for others. There should never be a time when you're like, oh, Ian's still on the floor. You know what I mean? Um, so I think that's to I use a lot of words there, but I think that for me is kind of what you saw, and it's I expected teams to play him differently. Did I expect him to necessarily go 0 for 8 and, you know, play only 16 minutes and be taken out of the starting lineup? No. Those are decisions that obviously the staff decided to make on the playing time and stuff like that. But at the same time, if he's not necessarily producing, then you got to figure out something else. So, to your question, I think he's just seen a totally different side of defense that he hasn't seen in high school and even in college up to this point. And it's a learning experience. You got to learn. Okay, I've seen the defenses play this way. This is what works against that. Or I've seen them. They try to get physical in this type of situation. Let's go and let's hit him with a back door, or whatever it is. Like it's just a matter of experience. And he's a freshman. He hasn't necessarily seen it. So I think that's kind of what we've seen from Ian.
Yeah, he's facing some double teams as well a little bit on Saturday. He had the 3 assists against Pittsburgh, so, trying to do some creation things, but he's really used to having the ball in his hands and scoring the basketball, beating other players with his athleticism and his shooting. And tonight there were some things that he had to do outside of that skill set, like he was coming into the lane on a cut and couldn't quite gather the ball.